Hey ladies and gentlemen, this is Miss Humbert here, and today we're going to be doing Unit 4 Notes 2. So we're going to talk about factoring by grouping. So in order to factor by grouping, you have to have mastered that greatest common factor idea. So hopefully that's something you did so that this Note G will go a little bit better for you. So let's kind of talk about things a little bit. First of all, so factor by grouping, okay? We use this factor by grouping idea when there are 4 terms. Okay, so we're basically learning how to factor. That's what this whole unit is about. It's about factoring. So we're starting to learn factoring by grouping. So that can only be used when there are 4 terms. So here are our steps. Okay, so it's always good to write the steps down so then you can reference them if you get stuck while you're working through your homework. So for the first one, group the terms into 2 groups of 2. Okay, so the first 2 go in a group, the second 2 go in a group. Pull out the greatest common factor of each group. So you're just focusing on the greatest common factor of just that group and then the greatest common factor of just that second group. Then when you pull out the greatest common factor, here's the great thing about grouping. The parentheses that are left over when you take out the GCF should match. Okay, so then you can write those as a parenthesis, and then in your other parenthesis will be your other GCFs that you factored out. So you'll basically have 2 binomials being multiplied together as your answer. So it's kind of undoing the box or the FOIL method in a way, except this time we have 4 terms. So let's take a look. So for this first one, okay, we're going to simplify this. So there's 4 terms. So my first step is to make my 2 groups. Now I'm going to take a look at the greatest common factor of the first group. So I'm asking myself, okay, what divides 1 and 2? Well, that's just going to be 1, so that doesn't really help me. So then what can I take out of x squared and x? Well, I can take out an x. So out of this first group, I'm dividing out an x. So x squared divided by x is just x. 2x divided by x is just 2. Now I want to focus on this second group over here. So I have 4x and I have 8. Well, what divides 4 and 8? Well, that's going to be 4. My next question, can I take an x out of each term? And the answer is no, I can't. So I'm going to divide each term by 4. So 4 over 4 cancels out and I'm left with x. 8 over 4 is 2. So now I can factor by grouping. So what you notice is that my leftovers, as I call them, match. They're both x plus 2. So I'm going to write them out in a parenthesis. And once I've gotten rid of my x plus 2, I'm going to go ahead and write my x plus 4. So this right here is my final answer for number 1. Okay, 2 binomials being multiplied, that's my answer. Now let's take a look at number 2. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to make 2 groups. So between 3 and 6, what can I divide out? Well, I can divide out a 3. Between x squared and x, what can I divide out? I can divide out an x. So I'm taking each of these and dividing them by 3x. So 3 over 3 cancels out. X squared over x is just x. Negative 6 divided by 3 is negative 2, and that x over x will cancel out. Next question, what divides 9 and 18? Well, that's just going to be 9. So I'm taking each of these and I'm dividing by 9. So when I do that, 9 over 9 cancels and I'm left with x. Negative 18 divided by 9 is negative 2. So if you look, our leftovers match. So if you were to go through this and your leftovers didn't match, then you did something wrong. Maybe you didn't pull out the greatest common factor. Maybe you only pulled out a common factor. Because your leftovers should always match. So we have x minus 2 and x minus 2. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write those out. And now, once I've written those out, I'm going to write what's left over, which is 3x plus 9. And these 2 are my final answer. I have 2 binomials being multiplied. Taking a look at number 3, same thing. So I'm going to make my 2 groups. What can I divide 2 and 5 by? Well, that's just divisible by 1, so I can't take out a coefficient. And for x squared and x, I can divide each by x. So then I'm taking and dividing each of these terms by x. So 2x squared divided by x, well, the 2 is still going to be there. X squared over x is just x. And then the 5 is going to stay, but x over x is going to cancel to 1, so I'm just going to write it as 5. Then, what can I take out between 4 and 10? Well, I can take out a 2. So then I'm taking and I'm dividing each of those terms by 2. And then I end up with 2x plus 5 once I divide each of those terms by 2. So again, my leftovers are matching, which means I did this right, so I'm going to write out those first. And then I'm going to write what's left after that. Now, a lot of times I get students that ask me, what happens if I have x plus 2 times 2x plus 5? As in, these two are flip-flopped. That's 100% okay. Multiplication can be multiplied either way. So if you have them flip-flopped, that's fine. Okay, that's totally fine. So let's take a look at number 4 now. So, making our two groups. What divides 5 and 15? Well, that's just going to be 5. And then I can take an x out of each group. So I'm dividing each group by 5x. And then 5 over 5 cancels. X squared over x is just x. Negative 15 divided by 5 is negative 3. And x over x is going to cancel. What divides 10 and negative 30? Well, that's going to be 10. Which is good because I know when I divide by 10, I'll get that x minus 3 that I am looking for. So sometimes it helps to look at this parenthesis to help you to figure out what to divide here because you're trying to make a match. So that's a way you could look at it too. So now I can factor out this x minus 3. And once I've factored that out, I'm going to write what's left over, which is 5x plus 10. So that right there is your final answer for number 4. Let's take a look at number 5. So for number 5, now we have some more involvement, okay, because we have more p's. So first I want to take a look at my first group. Between 21 and 12, I can divide out a 3. So I'm going to divide out a 3. Now I look and I have p cubed and p squared. So I can actually take out an entire p squared out of that first group. So I'm dividing each group by p squared, or 3p squared, sorry. So 12 divided by 3 is 4. P cubed divided by p squared is p. Negative 21 divided by 3 is negative 7. And those p squareds are going to cancel out to 1, so I'm just going to leave that as 7. Between 28 and 49, I can take out a 7, so I'm going to write that out down there. And then I can't take a p out of each term because there isn't a p in that 49 term. So I'm just dividing by 7. So 28 divided by 7 is 4, and then we have p. Negative 49 divided by 7 is a negative 7. So again, our leftovers are matching, so I can write those out here. So I have 4p minus 7, and then I have 3p squared plus 7. So this, whoa! So this right here is my final answer for number 5. Let's take a look at number 6. So for number 6, we're going to make our two groups. Between 8 and 64, you can actually divide out an 8. Between r to the third and r squared, we can take out a full r to the second. So now I'm dividing each of those terms by 8r squared. Well, 8 divided by 8 just gives me 1, and so I'm just going to leave it. R cubed divided by r is just r. Negative 64 divided by 8 is going to give me a negative 8, and then the r squareds will cancel. Now I'm looking at r and minus 8. Okay, there's no coefficient and no letter that I can take out of r and minus 8. On our previous note sheet, we learned that that meant that there was no GCF. Okay, when I'm factoring by grouping though, yes, there is no GCF, but to remind myself, I'm going to write it as plus 1. So I'm going to pretend that I took a 1 out. Because if you notice, the leftovers already matched at that point without even taking out a GCF. Here's why I put that 1 there. So you factor out that r minus 8. I took out this 1 there to remind myself that when I write out my second parenthesis, I need to have that plus 1 there. So that's why I took that 1 out. Even though it's not technically a greatest common factor, it was just to remind myself that it was there. So let's take a look at number 7. So for number 7, we're going to factor by grouping. Okay, so what divides 12 and 2? Well, that's going to be 2. So I can take 2 out of each term. And then what divides x squared and x cubed? Well, that's going to be x squared. So I'm dividing each of these by 2x squared. Well, 12 divided by 2 is 6. X cubed divided by x squared is just x. And then 2 divided by 2 is just 1. And x squared over x also cancels to 1. So this time, again, we need to make sure that that 1 is written there so that we know that it is included in the parenthesis. So here is another trick with grouping. What you'll notice is that there is a negative sign between the two groups. So if there is a negative sign between the two groups, then you need to take out a negative greatest common factor. If there is a negative between the two groups, you need to take out a negative greatest common factor. Well, what divides 30 and 5? That's going to be 5. But because it's negative in the middle, I'm dividing each term by a negative 5. 30 divided by negative 5 is 6, and then x. 5 divided by 5 is just 1. Okay, so then I have 6x plus 1, 6x plus 1, so I can write that out. And then, once I've written that out, I'm going to write what's left after that, which is 2x squared minus 5. So I have 6x plus 1 and 2x squared minus 5. So that's your final answer for number 7. Let's take a look at number 8. So for number 8, again, we're going to make our groups. Between 6 and 16, you can take out a 2. Between v cubed and v squared, you can take out a v squared. So you're dividing each of those terms by 2v squared. Then you're left with 3v minus 8. Between 21 and 56, you can take out a 7. You cannot take out any v's because there's not a v in the last term. And then you're left with 3v minus 8. So again, our leftovers are matching, so we can go ahead and factor those out. And once we factor those out, we're going to write what's left over, which is 2v squared plus 7. So this right here is our final answer. Again, you can have those parentheses flip-flopped. Let's take a look at the last two. So these two have a lot of letters, but we're going to do the same process. So what divides 12 and 3? Well, that's going to be 3. So now let's take a look at my x squareds. I have an x squared actually in each term. So that means I can take out an x squared out of that first group. Then I see I have a u in each term, or I do not have a u in each term, and I do not have a v in each term. So I can't take out u's or v's. So really all I'm doing is dividing each of these by 3x squared. Well, 12 divided by 3 is 4. X squared over x squared cancels, so we're just left with u. 3 over 3 cancels to 1. X squared over x squared cancels to 1. So all we have left is our v. You could write it as 1v if you wanted to. Between 28 and 7, you can take out a 7. Notice that there's a y in each term, so we can take out a y, and that leaves our u and v left over, which is what we want. So 28 divided by 7 is 4. The y's cancel. We have u, and then 7 over 7 cancels. Y over y cancels, and we're left with v. So we check, good, our leftovers match, we can factor those out, and then we're going to write what's left after that, and we get our final answer for the grouping. Let's take a look at this last one, number 10. So we're going to set up our two groups. Between 40 and 25, you can take out a 5. I'm just going to write it down here so I have more space. You'll notice that there's an a in each term, so I can take out an a. And I can't take out a c squared or a k squared because they're not in both terms. So then I'm going to take, and 40 divided by 5 is 8. A over a cancels, and I have c squared. 25 divided by 25 is 5. A over a cancels, and I have k squared. Out of my second group, between 34 and 20, I can take out a 4. I can also take out a b out of each term. So I'm dividing each by 4b. Well, 32, I'm just going to have to write it down here. 32 divided by 4 is 8, and then we'll have that c squared. 20 divided by 4 is 5, and again, we'll have that k squared. So you see here that your leftovers are matching. So I can go ahead and I'm going to write out my leftovers in one group. And then once I've gotten rid of my leftovers, I put my greatest common factors in the other group. Again, the order can be flip-flopped if you want. So that concludes your note video today. Please make sure you get that Schoology quiz taken. Thank you for listening.